One night, my husband and I were sitting on our bed, having a brainstorming meeting, which we schedule sometimes when either of us feels a little stuck in our creative ideas. I'd been thinking for a while about writing some kind of fiction series that would draw people in and maybe even change their lives a little bit. For the better, of course, after having read it. I had this idea that I planned to just throw out there within a couple of weeks, and I was trying to figure out a connection that just wouldn't come together for me in one of the plot lines. So I started to explain it to my husband. There was this king, and there was magic, and there was a throne that could only be secured by a male son with magic, and there were all these children who were characters from fairy tales, and one who hid his magic because he knew he would be in danger of the king if he found out he had the gift. And pretty soon my husband's eyes glazed over, and he said, "I think I need a whiteboard for this." So he took out the whiteboard, and I listed off the characters, and before we knew it, this series had turned into something massive and wild and a little bit out of control. We needed maps of more than one land, and we needed timelines and 42 character brainstorms, and this was much bigger than a few weeks could produce. I did not even know if I could write it. I had only, up until now, written literary novels, nothing as imaginative as fantasy required. But I knew I had to try. I have loved fairy tales since I was a little girl. My mom was a librarian, and she exposed us to all kinds of stories, particularly fairy tales. I remember reading about Cinderella and Rapunzel and the Snow Queen and Hansel and Gretel, and for years people had been rewriting fairy tales. I love those stories just as much as the originals, so I wanted to write my own, except this one will turn villainy and heroics on its head. What I mean by that is I believe everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. There is always a reason people do what they do. When you read about the famous villains in fairy tales, you don't know much about them. You just know they're villains. Well, Fairendale is going to visit those villains and tell their stories. We're going to find out why they're villains. We'll hear from the sea witch in The Little Mermaid, the tricksters from The Emperor's New Clothes, the wolf from Little Red Riding Hood, and so many others. Fairendale is aimed at the upper middle grade age group, so 10 to 12-year-olds. But I believe that anyone who loves fantasy and fairy tales and stories with plenty of adventure and imagination and heart will fall in love with Fairendale like I have. The series follows the story of King Willis, who is a king born with no magic in a land that requires magic to sit a throne. His son has no magic either. But because Fairendale is the kingdom with the most beauty in all of the land, King Willis is obsessed with making sure no one else will steal his throne. Only a boy with magic could. So King Willis hunts down a magical boy a prophetess has warned lives within the very gates of his kingdom. His story of pursuit is interwoven with the story of children on the run, children who become villains for one good reason or another. Fairendale is a series written in seasons. Each season has 6 episodes, with 5 seasons total, so a grand total of 30 stories. The first episode in the first season will release March 9th, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to share these stories with you. Be sure to sign up for the email notification list, where you'll get an email every time a new episode releases. This series will take a few years to finish, and your presence on a notification list will ensure you never miss anything related to the world of Fairendale. As a bonus, you'll get a short story prequel that tells the story of another king who ruled the land once upon a time. Thanks so much for your support.